Hey there, how there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Dabbit welcoming you to yet another Cutter retrospective to do with Degrassi. I did the Kids of Degrassi Street retrospective because that was the original series before we got to Degrassi Junior High and High. You know, you have got some kids who are actually like in both the Kids of Degrassi series and of course the real Degrassi series, like Stacy Matishin, who was Lisa in the original version, and then Caitlin in Degrassi Junior High. I also did Degrassi Junior High, the 3 seasons, talked about it for 30 minutes, trying to pinpoint some stuff and all that, and like some storylines. And now we got to get to the Degrassi High retrospective and all that, as I promised for New Year's Day. So here we go. So it started on November 6, 1989. A month later would be one of the biggest tragedies in Canadian history as 14 female engineering students were killed by a lone gunman in Montreal. And then February 18th, 1999 was the finale. There was a lot of topics like abortion, cancer, suicide, and HIV/AIDS. It was on location in Toronto at Centennial College Story Arts Center, Business School. It was critically acclaimed. So, anyway, it received some great awards and all that. The end of the series actually was was multiple behind the scenes problems, including creative exhaustion in the aging cast. The funding was lost, and everyone thought they ran its course. There would be a movie called Schools Out that would portray these guys later on, and then Degrassi Talks, a docu series, until Degrassi: The Next Gen got the wheels back in motion and all that. There was some massive redemption and all that. Like Joy was back, Caitlin, Spike, Snake, Wheels, Lucy, the Farrell twins, Arthur, Yick, Kathleen, Melanie, Liz, BLT, Alexa, Simon, Dwayne, Michelle, and Chris. And Michelle and Scooter were added in. Additions, massive additions. Cole Tanner, we'll talk about that later. Scott Smith, who was a senior who dates Kathleen but is finally abusive. Unfortunately, the guy who played Scott, I think, was problematic too. Patrick was added in as a Irish-born student who dates Spike and all that. So that was huge and all that too. And then Bronco comes in, who makes a thing for Lucy and all that. So a lot of concept. They wanted to go into the high school area and all that. Let me see what's end of the series. Yeah. Multiple factors had it. Kid Hood was actually exhausted and frustrated by TV work and agreed to the second season of Degrassi High to please the network and fans, and the partnership between Hood and Shiler was deteriorating. Shiler detailed in her memoir that Hood was becoming more temperamental towards the end of production. And all that. And WGBH in Boston could not get funding from the PBS Children's Department because of the aging cast and had to withdraw from the show. All that. So we got the episodes and all that. So, well, they're not giving me the, yeah, they usually give me like the episodes and all that, like what their thing was happening. So anyway, yeah, so it's like, yeah, Wikipedia doesn't give me the full feature into the episodes. I had to go to the Degrassi wiki for that. All right, so A New Start was the first episode in November 1989. And this was when Erica actually ends up being pregnant and doesn't know what to do with the kid. Heather gives her moral support, but Erica decides to abort the baby, and abortion was really talked about more in detail than the whole Spike thing. But anyway, she does get it and all that, which is kind of awkward and all that. Breaking up is hard to do was the next episode. This was when Michelle's parents break up and she doesn't know what to do. Dream On was when Arthur actually has feelings towards Caitlin, who's actually closer to Claude. Everybody Wants Something, the episode, is that Caitlin finally breaks up with Joey and they have to do a music video. Nobody's Perfect was when Kathleen meets Scott, but Scott has a history of jealousy and violence that she has to get out of. Just Friends was next, and Heather wants to go with Will's Little White Lies. The eighth episode is when Diana wants to go to a party. All that. 16 is the episode in which Michelle is upset that her father is oppressive to LD and all that. I mean, to BLT, and decides to move out because she does not want to deal with her um, father being so abusive towards her relationship with BLT. So that's what happened. Michelle struggles to work part time and still go to school because she's in her apartment and all that. But unfortunately, though, she can't finish everything off. Michelle's dad decides to help her out financially, knowing that she's not going to break up with BLT. All in a Good Cause was when Caitlin is with Claude and all that. Well, yeah, Caitlin is with Claude. Well, Arthur and Yick, their relationship is soured and decides to paper toilet paper Mr. Radich's house for a school charity thing to do with UNICEF, some kind of bad thing. And Yick comes along. Unfortunately for Arthur and Yick, Radich does find out it was them and tells them to clean up his house and all that. And it was weird that Radich, like when Arthur and Yick toilet paper and Radich sees something, he comes outside, but he's in like his freaking boxers. So it was like funny. It was funny as fuck. All that. But Caitlin was with Claude. Their relationship was going to dangerous places when he wants to do graffiti at weapons factory. I thought it was an animal testing factory, but it was not. So they decided to graffiti themselves. But for some odd reason, Caitlin overdresses in a sense and wears some clothing that's caught on the fence the first time. Claude helps her out, and then they graffiti it. A night watchman sees them and then they escape. Well, Claude manages to escape over the fence, but Caitlin is stuck because of her jewelry and all that, which is kind of weird. Wouldn't you want to wear all black? She's upset because Claude runs off in the distance and she's being tagged with community service and all that. Next episode, Natural Attraction, is when Heather regrets supporting Erica's abortion. Testing 1, 2, 3 is when Joey actually gets tested for learning disability and finds out he has one and doesn't want to continue his education, but and all that. Anyway, so yeah, he gets a learning disorder and all that. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention about Degrassi High. The premiere is the fact that it was like the high school guys forcing Joey and them, like like hazing them, and Radich ends up being Joey's vice principal, and he's not too happy with it. Nevertheless, yeah, this was when Joey's learning disability, and then Caitlin is mad at Claude for not going to a court hearing because Caitlin's in trouble. She gets herself community service because of the courts, but she's upset that Claude refuses to go to her trial. It was a double barrel mistake because Claude knew that if Well, Claude knew that if he went, his parents would be disapproving of him. And B is that he knew that if he went to the court thing, the security guard would have recognized him and then he would have got in trouble. So he was trying to skip responsibility and Caitlin had to take the blame. I wish Caitlin had just basically badmouthed Claude and caused him to get in trouble. It Creeps is the famous kind of Halloween episode in which Lucy wants to make her feminine based horror film, and Snake, Wheels, and Joey and a lot of people pair up, and then her film is not the best around, but still gets a clap. Lucy doesn't think she's worthy of it, but Mr. Colby tells her that it was a good job. No, it could be Mr. Colby. It should be someone else. But anyway, yeah. And then Shane comes in, first time since his accident. He's fine, but he's got brain damage, and he basically blurts out some stuff towards Spike and all that. Stressed Out was the 15th episode of season 1, the final episode of season 1. The students stress over exams. Caitlin's upset that Miss Avery was fired and starts a petition, but doesn't know the whole story of everything. And Michelle takes caffeine pills to get through studying and working. Season 1 ends that way. Season 2 was what I forgot to mention when I talked about Miss Avery is that at the end of the Bye Bye Junior High, Spike had to learn she had to take summer school courses and all that. She's upset, especially with the fact that Emma keeps getting sick and she has to keep missing school because of Emma. And Miss Avery basically blasts her saying, "Count your lucky stars, you can actually have a kid." And then, but the Bad Blood, it starts season 2. It's basically Joey wants to earn the money for his first car, but Dwayne hurts him. Loyalties is when Snake wants to ask Michelle, who's getting over a breakup with BLT. And then Caitlin wants a romantic anniversary for her parents, but her father is seen with another woman, so that marriage is in trouble. Then a tangled web is the problem is that Wheels is having issues with his grandmother again, and he's tired of her telling him what to do. And she's fed up with him disobeying and lying to her. So yeah, Wheels and his grandmother don't really get along with each other as much because Wheels thinks that his grandmother's a little controlling. But the fact is she moved in with him so that Wheels can, attend Degrassi stuff because, Wheels is thought the parents died and all that. Wheels says he's going to Snake's house to study, but goes to a concert and breaks curfew and all that. She finally throws him out and all that. And Caitlin is unsure what to do about her mother. Should she tell her mother about her father being with another woman? So yeah, so Wheels basically was falling off the deep end. I mean, you could watch it in season 3 and see of junior high and see that Wheels basically is not taking a lot of responsibility. Sure, his parents had died, but they basically just glossed him over. Body Politics is the episode in which Lucy tries to find a date, but she's outspoken, so she catches the attention of a new boy named Bronco, and that's a relationship. It kind of feels like Lucy is kind of like Emma in a sense, being outspoken and basically not getting a date and all that. I think that's Emma too, because of her being outspoken. She doesn't really get guys to come to her. She has to come to them. Like, I look at it this way with Emma is that, how many guys actually wanted a relationship with her and all that? Not even Peter did. Peter wanted to be with Manny first and foremost, and Emma was the backup plan, even though that Emma wanted Peter and all that. But yeah, the outspokenness basically costing them relationships. That's Emma to T. Cross wires is when Liz is having recurring nightmares about when her mother's fiance would actually sexually abuse her and all that. Alex and Tessa go together. The all-nighter is when home trips and self-worth are revealed and all that. Home Sweet Home is when Well, Wills ends up staying at Joey's house because he's get kicked out, but he's outstayed his welcome and all of that. He can't find a place of her own, and actually decides to take money from Joey's mom, which was kind of pathetic and all of that. That he would steal from Joey's parents. He obviously gets kicked out, and Snake he stays with Snake, but Snake forces him to sleep on the porch. And I think Wheels has to make a promise to his grandmother. Extracurricular activities is when you know. Well, so Caitlin's parents want her to come back home so they can start again. That's kind of pathetic and all that. Showtime, and then of course comes Showtime, the massive episode that was sent. It was a two-part. It started on January 28th, 1991, and ended February 4th. So part one was there. The producers of Degrassi actually contemplated suicide addressing, but they thought that would be copycat and all that. And the intent was to avoid glorifying suicide and focus on the ramifications and all of that. So part one of Showtime is when Degrassi is about to host a talent show. Claude is called to audition. He recites a macabre poem. Unfortunately, it's inappropriate for the lighthearted nature of the talent show. And Claude's upset and all that. Joanne tries to calm Claude down, but Claude says that you don't know what it's like to be me. Joanne says she has problems too, but she thinks that Claude should be able to see someone. Of course, Claude in the background has problems. His parents both don't really want him around and all that. Anyway, we see the sit really well. Joey and Snake doing the everybody wants something with Mexican hats and all that. Claude approaches Caitlin with a white rose, saying that he came to say goodbye. Caitlin's dismissive and is, of course, upset with Claude for leaving her high and dry in the whole graffiti thing, obviously. So Claude decides to walk to his locker, produces a gun, and, you know, shoots himself. Of course, we don't hear that. Well, if you, in the original airings, you really wouldn't hear it, but because of sound technology, you heard it just as they were talking about Macbeth in class. Snake asks to go to the washroom, and then that's when he finds Claude's lifeless body, runs to Radich, who's looking pretty fine himself, and then they both run to the boys' washroom and have the situation and all that. The class is basic. The classes are basically told about Claude's suicide and all that, and there are many questions to be asked. In a class um, uh, moderated by Radich, Joanne tries to think, what the heck did she do wrong and all that, and Radich assures her that she did everything she could, but Joanne says, I need to do more and all that. And Trish, the one with the mohawk, comforts her and all that. A couple of Dwayne's understudies basically are there too, but Radich then makes a poignant speech about we all feel overwhelmed sometimes, but we don't commit suicide because once we do, everything's over. So he makes a good speech. And then in uh, the English class, Lucy and Spike are critical, saying that it was selfish for him to take his own life because it would affect everybody and make everyone feel bad about him and all that. A lot of people, Joy says that Claude's going to hell as suicide as a sin and all that. Bronco actually feels guilty for cutting Claude's poem off, but Lucy tells him that it was there and all that. So anyway, Caitlin actually comes home from everything and finds a letter addressed to her from Claude with roses and all that, and says that he forgives her for her alleged treatment of him, but she throws the bouquet to the floor. In part two, we don't know about the talent show and all that, the status and all that. Caitlin is actually haunted by Claude in her dreams and all that. So that's it. And then they had to talk about the future of the talent show. Joanne thinks it's inappropriate, although Lucy says life has to go on. And Joanne storms off. However, Spike comes up with a bright idea. Spike says that they should hold the talent show as a benefit for suicidal teens and all that. So basically, it's the best of both worlds. You hold the talent show and you talk about the suicide problems. Um, Caitlin is having problems and all that, but she decides to go over to Joey and talks to Joey about a science project. In the meantime, Wills comes back and actually repays Joey money he stole from Joey's mother, and they reconcile. Basically, is that Wills got a job at a gas station. It's not easy, but he's doing his life better, and they decide to reconcile. And it was Snake who found Claude. Joey decides to go over to the Snake, and Snake does shake a little bit, saying he should not have been there so late. He should have been there sooner. But Joey says that it was unavoidable and all of that. Snake does have to take a few days off. So then anyway, Joey is not happy with Claude and all of that, Caitlin. And then the conversation turns to Claude. Caitlin doesn't want to talk about it and didn't mean to hurt Claude. However, Joey basically tells her that Claude wanted to hurt her and make her feel guilty and to not give him the satisfaction. Practically, what he's saying is that basically Claude is doing this on purpose to haunt you, that and because you rejected his advances and all that. This does have parallels to Rick in Degrassi Next Gen. Is that Rick dies and all that, but Rick basically haunts Emma and all that. I know I've done a video about the similarities between Rick and Claude. I will link to that in the description of the retrospective. So anyway, it was just amazing and all of that. So that was that. So then we get to Three's a Crowd, the 12th episode of season 2. Spike has fallen for Snake and wants to ask him to the formal, but he's still interested in Michelle and all of that. One Last Dance was the final episode of Degrassi High in the TV days. And there's a lot of talk about HIV and AIDS and all that. And Dwayne, may have it and all that because Penny, his girlfriend, has HIV/AIDS. And, you know, he's upset over everything. Joey actually asked Caitlin to the formal, thinking that it would be they're on good terms, and it works. But yeah, Dwayne is upset because the talk about HIV and AIDS, and he basically beats up Joey, thinking Joey was the rumor, but it was not Joey's fault at all. And Joey tells Dwayne because Dwayne goes to the formal, even though that people are shunning him. He says that people don't know the real you and all that. So Joey cheers up Dwayne, even though that Dwayne and Joey had fights with each other. Um, and that was what happened. So that was huge and all that. And Dwayne goes there and all. And then the last words of Degrassi High was Trish actually asked Mr. Radich to dance with him. All right, so that was it. However, that was not completely the end of the Degrassi High era because it was a one episode TV film called School's Out, which aired on January 5th, 1992 on CBC and was the finale to Degrassi High, known as Degrassi Classic, if you will. So the movie centered on the Degrassi students during their first summer post graduation. The relationship between Joey and Caitlin. And Joey actually wanted to marry Caitlin. And then somehow Joey ends up with Tessa while still being involved with Caitlin and all that. He has sex with both of them and brags about it. Meanwhile, Snake is frustrated because he of his inability to get a girlfriend and all that, which is kind of stupid because Snake's a decent person. Anyway, there was another subplot. Well, the subplot was that there was a party thrown by Lucy, I think, all that, and Lucy's cottage, her parents' cottage. She throws a party for everyone, and Simon and Alexa are getting married and all that. So anyhow, that was huge and all that. And then of course Wheels starting to drink beer and all that, even though he promised not to because of his parents dying in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. He actually ends up wanting to go to Alberta to start a life with his new girlfriend Karen. All that. Unfortunately, though, he gets behind that wheel of a car while drunk, even though that he shouldn't be driving. Lucy asks him to get chips and all that, not aware that Wheels was drunk and all that. Wheels does, and then they have a massive crash that kills and that crashes into another car, which kills a 2-year-old boy in the other vehicle and blinds Lucy Fernandez and all that. So it was like humongous and all that. So yeah, everything happens. So yeah, Joey wanted to marry Caitlin. Caitlin doesn't think they're ready for the commitment. And then Joey bumps into Tessa Campanelli because she had a problem and all that. So anyway, Joey sees Tessa and Caitlin and all that, which is kind of dumb and all that. So yeah, the summer lake house party and all that. Snake actually saves Allison from drowning and all that. And it's a lot of anxiety and all that. So Wheels leaves the party with Lucy to get chips, but crashes in another car. Joey visits Wheels in jail, and Wheels says that he's been charged with criminal negligence causing death, criminal negligence causing injury, and drunk driving, and says that it's not his fault because the child was not wearing a seatbelt and Lucy wanted chips and all that. And is upset that Snake does not want to deal with Wheels and all that. So anyhow, you know, Lucy is at the hospital and is immobilized and all that, which is kind of awkward and all that. So it was just terrible and all that. And then, Snake blurts out that Joey's having a great summer with Tessa and Caitlin and says the F word, the fuck word. And Caitlin's famous line, "You were fucking Tessa Campanelli." So anyway, Joey, I mean, Snake does apologize to Joey about blurting out that secret, but Joey says that Caitlin would have found out and didn't know much about Caitlin and should not have been with those two girls at the same time. So Alexa and Simon are getting married and all that. Erica actually is teaching in the Dominican Republic. Wheels and Lucy are absent. Well, Wheels is in prison, and Lucy has regained vision in one of her eyes but can't attend the wedding. Snake is accompanied by Pam, who he met at university. Anyway, Joey actually apologizes to Caitlin, who forgives him in a sense. And they decide to have a dance as friends and all that. So, yeah, it was huge and all that. 2.3 million people watched it on CBC, which doubled the actual stuff. So, that was just a great ending to a great show. And that's the way Degrassi High ended. But that wasn't the last of Degrassi. Because unbeknownst to people, 6 years later in 1999, the show Jonathan, which was basically a talk show with a teenage flair hosted by Jonathan Torrance, would actually bring in Degrassi alumni back, even Avery and Radich. Radich looks fine in that one. And they talk about their presence and all that. And one couple came from San Francisco to the Jonathan set in Toronto just to be there. And someone from Chicago as well. So they had the big thing. And they were pitching if Degrassi should have a reboot. And unbeknownst to everyone, that was the catalyst for Degrassi Next Gen to start in 2001. CBC almost had it, but because of the production cost and the CBC is called what to call the government broadcaster, they didn't really have the money and the funds. CTV, on the other hand, was more public and they had the money and the funds and the for the shooting scene. So they swiped in, they took the Degrassi stuff, and the rest is freaking history. Thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Diamond.